Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Conversations and Connections. I'm your host, Sandy McGregor, and I'm so glad you're here with us today. I cannot wait to introduce to you our special guest. We have Rachel Joy Baribeau with us today, and we have so much to get into, so much to pack into this next 30 minutes, and I couldn't be more excited about it. So thank you, Rachel, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
it's a pleasure. So excited. So I was able to read your book, which I cannot wait to talk about, Relentless Joy, which was such an inspiration. And I can't wait to hear more about your journey of writing that book and share it with everybody here today. But I think what I'd like to share is just a little bit about you, and then we'll go into some of the pieces that I've missed about you personally, and then you can start to talk a little bit about your faith journey and your story. So, a little bit of background on Rachel. She is an award-winning storyteller, inspirational speaker, and I've heard and I know you're incredible. I'm a highly sought-after teacher, national movement maker, and a former, I love the ceiling-shattering national sportscaster, excuse me. She received your bachelor's in radio, television, and from Auburn University. And you are the host of Joystarter's podcast, which I recommend everybody to get on board to that because it is such a joy to listen to your podcast. And currently, you live in the state of Florida,
I
which is
do.
luckily a little warmer than what we have right here in Toronto.
Yes, although we've had some low temps as of late, and we are weak here in Florida. Our blood is weak. We're
I
like,
can
it is
imagine.
so cold. It's
Well,
it's not even past 25 like yet, and we're freezing. We're
we need
like,
sweaters.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that too. You were out in California not too long ago, right? And you were
Yes.
talking about the temperature out there as well.
I was expecting, it's San Diego, so I was expecting everybody says it's 70 all year round. And I walked outside and I said, it's freezing, but it was beautiful. Beautiful and freezing. Yes.
Well,
And you know what
that's good.
though? There's always something I'm such a deep thinker, and I've had two friends of mine comment on this. They're like, you take ordinary things that everybody lives about every day, and
Mhm.
like you think so deeply about it. And even the conversation we just had about seasons, I've been marinating on that a lot. In
Yeah.
this winter season, I've been nesting. I stay home. I love my home. I'm organizing, I'm cleaning, I'm decluttering, I'm
Mhm.
doing those things. So I really just want to impress, because when the Lord puts a message on my heart, it's for other people. It's our seasons. You're not supposed to shine every season. You're not supposed to go, go,
Yeah.
go. I was talking on another show on the perspective with Pastor Mike about, a lot of people are buying into this hustle culture, and
Mm.
I used to hustle, and I no longer am in this hustle culture. I'm in this savor culture where I'm
Right.
going to savor my life, however long I have.
I
I'm
love
gonna
that.
savor. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's an amazing segue into your book that we'll get into for sure, because you definitely encourage people to pursue relentless joy, and that does mean savoring each of your moments. So maybe talk a little bit about your family currently, who you are, and a little bit of your faith story with us today.
Yeah. Interesting about the conversation we just had, because I just made a post about this on my social media, and I love to connect with people on my social media. I have some of the best of friends, some prayer warriors, some people
Mm.
I pray for just through social media. And I had made a post about these boots that I was wearing in church on Sunday. And forgive me, I'm an emotional person, and I don't apologize. So I shouldn't say forgive me for crying, but
I
I was wearing
understand.
but I was wearing these boots in church, and I remembered I don't wear them much. I remember one of the um, times, seminal moments in my memory was I was wearing them with my mother, who's now in heaven, and we were dreaming of my husband and dreaming of where he was and dreaming of meeting him.
Mm.
And here it was, fast forward all those years, and I'm sitting in church with my husband next to me and then my daughter next to him. And so it I think about the significance that objects hold, and I wrote about that in my
Mm.
book, With My Father's Table. But I thought about that, and so yes, so I married a man 3 years ago. We've been
Mhm.
together 7 years. We did long distance. So for all my people still looking for their person, long distance can work if it is the right person.
Yes.
So we did that for 4.5 years. We got married, and I married into four beautiful children.
It's
Now
amazing.
today 2017, about to be 16 and 14. So been with them 7 years. And so I joke whenever I speak and in the book, I had a dog, Sandy, and then I got 4 kids. I, I have had some training, some training for sure.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Oh,
So
I love that.
yeah, and so that has been that's my family.
Mhm.
And my faith journey is that I could sum it up. I really can't, but I'll try to sum it up in a
True.
sentence.
You have to
Just
read the book.
yeah,
People really
right?
need to read the book, but let's do like a summary if we can.
Yes. Jesus is my best friend. He is my Abba Father. He is my protector and provider.
Mm,
He's a lover of my soul.
mm,
He's my rescuer. He is my Papa God. I have the most intimate and beautiful relationship. And if
mm,
I could tell anybody today anything, it's that he does not desire religion from
mm,
you, desires relationship from you. And he created your soul. I teach people he didn't take the day off and go to the heavenly Panera that day. He created you and he loves you. And that's my faith journey. And I was the prodigal daughter, and at moments I still am. And I
yeah.
would tell people out there that are wondering to stop. I saw this the other day on the internet. Stop preparing your speech and just come home. He's got
Mm,
a ring robe for you.
oh, I love that so much, Rachel. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's really inspiring. And I know that that is so much of what you want to share on your this platform that the Lord has given you when you're speaking to a variety of different audiences that um, we are all prodigals and he is waiting with open arms for all of us. And I think it's so beautiful how you share that through your book so openly and vulnerably about just about your journey and your story. So there's one thing I wanted to read to you this morning that in my devotions the other day that I was reading, and it's a verse that I really felt like kind of encapsulates what you're doing in Hebrews. So I just wanted to read the last part of it. I really felt like I needed to share this with you this morning. Actually, it's the afternoon now. Hebrews 10:19 to 25, but it's just the last part of it actually. And it says, "Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as is in the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near." And I couldn't stop thinking about you, that what you're doing is you are encouraging people to love and good works. You are not letting that rest. You're not putting that aside. You were out there on a mission to encourage people. And I just wanted to say that this just jumped off the devotional when I was reading it. I thought I have to share that with you because that's really what you're doing. And I want to thank you for that. And I know there's countless people that are thanking you for that too. So yeah. And on that journey, um, part of that was adoption. And do you have just a moment maybe to share a little bit about that part of your journey?
Yeah. You're gonna make me cry this entire
I know
interview.
I actually hardly made it through that verse. I'm like, I should have been a little bit more prepared, but that's okay. Emotions are good. And people that know me know I'm a very emotional person as well. So we have
Yeah.
permission to cry.
Yes. And you know what? I spent half my life thinking that I'm too sensitive. And I would tell people out there that have been told the same thing, that you're not too anything. God made you in his image. You
Mm,
are too good. You're perfect. Does that not mean that we can't grow and change and be better? Absolutely. But God made you in his image. And I think there
mm,
are times God looks down at us, and I think it probably makes him sad that we don't like ourselves, we doubt ourselves, that we think negatively about ourselves. We want to change ourselves. And so I just want to speak that because
yeah.
I've learned over the years that my sensitivity, Sandy, and for all of your listeners and viewers, my sensitivity is my superpower.
Mm,
And the fact that I tried to quell that and tried to push down, tried to make myself less, I get emotional over sunset or a sunrise or watching an older couple hold hands or the giggle of a baby. I get emotional over those things, and I am now so grateful. And it's a gift that I have
mm,
to manage because it comes with, it can come with heaviness, and
mhm,
it's a cross at times to be able to carry other people's burdens. But I'm
mhm,
so grateful for it. So I just needed to say that to somebody who feels like us and it's like, oh, and that's our default is to say, "Oh, I'm sorry." "No, it's okay. It's okay that you're emotional." But my adoption journey is, I was adopted by my dad, David Lee Barbeau, and he, adopted me when I was 18 months old. I actually saw some wedding pictures. Thought I was looking for a picture of my mom, and I saw the joy and the promise in their eyes, and he said that when he met me, I crawled up into his lap at my grandmother's house and promptly soiled my diaper and then fell asleep. And he said it was love at first sight. And, and he passed away in 2014, quite
Mm,
unexpectedly, and I'm just so thankful for his strong
mm.
last name. When I was younger, I didn't like because people called me Barracuda and barbecue and all of those terrible names in
No.
junior high. But now I'm so grateful for it. I'm so grateful for his love, and I'm so grateful
Mm.
that he chose me. And I am such a strong advocate of adoption.
No, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's really an important thing to talk about because a lot of people don't know somebody's story. And often it can involve adoption. And I think it's a beautiful thing to talk about because we're all, as believers, we are adopted into God's family. That's ultimately we are his children, right? So it's adoption here today, right now, is such a beautiful, beautiful thing. So thank you for sharing that.
Of
So you
course.
have in your book, I just love your book. And you talk about how you have this incredible ability. And I know it's not always easy because when you're traveling, you're tired or you're rushing to a flight and whatever is going on. It's not always easy in an airport. But you seem to find people, Rachel, and they seem to find you. And you just sit with them and you talk with them and you get to know them and you have stories to share. And I wondered if there's maybe one that you might be able to share with us today that was really impactful for you.
Yes. So many of those, as you mentioned, and some of them in the book, and some will go in book number 2 that I'm working on right
Good.
now. Yes, and so but one particularly recently, and here's what I wanna tell everybody. I always invite people into my story. It's not that I'm not tired, it's not that I'm not cranky, it's not that I'm not irritated, it's
Mhm.
not that I'm any of the things, right, at an airport. It is that I have this awareness and there is what I call it's an action in the morning. I put on a garment of openness. I say, "Lord, whoever
Mm,
you have for me,
right.
send them to me. Whoever I need to be, somebody," vice versa, put and open my eyes to the
Mm,
beauty, to the hellos, to the goodbyes, to the cries, to the all
yeah.
of those things, and so I put on that garment, and recently I was coming home from a speaking engagement, sat down in a restaurant, few gentlemen next to me start chatting, and we're talking, and I always carry an extra copy or 2 in the book of my book, and when God pings me,
Mhm.
I call it a ping
Yeah.
in my soul, I will give it to them,
Mhm.
and I will sign it, and they're like, usually like, "What?" You know? And I've had the most deep conversations about faith and
Mm,
love and marriage and all of the things because of this. And so there was this one gentleman I was talking to, we were all sitting together and I was talking to all of them. And somehow he and I began to have a deeper conversation. That was, I was a or I was a music minister. Our
mm.
church closed down. I'm mad at God. I'm no
Wow.
longer in church. And so I gave him the book. I signed it. And that was that. And I never thought I would hear from him again.
Mhm.
And he wrote me an email, and I'm paraphrasing, but the email said something like, "Look, to be honest with you, your joy is a little almost overpowering to begin with. Like it's a lot. You are relentlessly joyful." And he said, for an introvert, it was a lot. And he said, "But I want you to know that because of you, there is a man in the world that is open to God again."
Wow, Rachel, that is so great. Those are the things you never know when God, like you said, the ping or the tap on the shoulder that and somebody described it to me. If you don't act within those first 5 to 10 seconds and the Holy Spirit's moving you, you're missing out on an opportunity. And you know that feeling, right? Where you're like, you didn't do it
Yes.
because you did it, you don't know if you're ever going to get any sort of response or answer. But sometimes the Lord brings you into that part of the story, and He did. And that is the
Yes.
encouragement sometimes you just needed that day for your soul. And that is amazing. What a great story.
And you made a great point, and that is this. The majority of times, we will not see the fruit. And so what I've been teaching people is this, is plant seeds for trees that you
Mm,
will never sit under.
yes. That's that's huge. It's really huge. And if we can have that mindset, it gives us freedom to walk day to day, knowing our encounters are divine appointments, but they're not for our glory. None of it
Yeah.
is. None of it
And
is.
and I have a friend, you just keep making great points. We need to do this again because we just keep
We
playing
will.
off.
We'll have to do a part two.
I know. And I have another friend who is a very famous football coach, and he had a very public falling out. And he said to me, he said, Rachel, and this is something profound that I'll never forget.
Mm,
He said, I love God and I loved God. He said, but the winning happened so fast. He said,
mm.
here was the line. He said, I tripped on my own glory.
Wow. Oh, that's a book.
That's a book
That's a
right
book.
there, and that is exactly what you do. It is not for
Wow.
our glory, and so when I feel ego creeping in, which to me has the enemy attached to it,
Of
get high
course.
on yourself. "You did good, Rachel.
Yes.
You made this happen.
Yes.
By your might, by your will." No,
Mm,
and I will get on my knees. I will pray. I will say because I don't want to be that person who's depending on
yeah.
my own any of those things, my own strength, because it's not happening to me. And by the way, this is not for worldly glory, worldly. I've chased fame before. I was a sportscaster. I wanted my name in lights. I wanted money. I wanted affirmation. I wanted all of those things.
Mhm.
And now, like, I live to make him famous, and I live to wear a crown in heaven, and I live so that one day somebody comes up to me in heaven, hopefully, and says, I'm here because of you.
Wow. That that's the game changer when we focus our eyes on eternity and
Yeah.
what that actually means. And a lot of that's been going on in my life because I've been studying the book of Revelation within my
Mm.
study group. And wow, whew, it's
Yeah.
a lot. But Jen Wilkin just put one out. It's been amazing. And then our pastor's been going through Second Peter. So it's almost like God's had me on this journey of you need to be focusing on eternity,
Mm.
eternity, heaven, and everything you're doing here. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's what I'm calling you to do to point people to Him is what matters the most. So it's been a
Amen.
really interesting fall for me, for sure.
Whew. And
Yeah.
it is a fall, it is
Yeah.
like it's a dying into yourself, it's
Yeah.
like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's quickly chat a little bit about your book,
Okay.
Relentless Joy. So, finding freedom, passion, and happiness, even when you have to fight for it. And I'm so glad you included that in brackets because I think most people that are picking up this book are fighting for joy. They're fighting for freedom and they're fighting for happiness, which we know only can come from the Lord. So, tell me a little bit about your book and your journey and your hope for this book. I'll show everybody again and I'll put it in our notes as well.
Thank you so much. So for years and years, people had told me that you need to write a book. And this is for anybody out there that has a dream
Mm,
and nothing happens by accident. You're listening to this podcast, you're watching it for a
mhm,
reason. So people had told me my whole life, you should write a book. You've climbed Kilimanjaro, you've done all these crazy things. Your life has been
yes.
like a movie.
Yeah,
And
really.
and right. And so 2018, I was introduced to by a friend to the book agent who did Heaven is for Real and the Left Behind series.
Mm,
And we together worked on a book proposal, and it was called Calling on the Hearts of Kings. And it was about my work in colleges
mhm,
at that time. And she said to me, I think you'll get between 1 and 3 offers, and I think you'll be able to choose. Well,
mm.
Sandy, God had a different plan. And that plan was no callback at all, not even one offer. And I to say that
Mm,
I was crushed, okay? And as I took some time later on to reflect, she called me, she said, "Honey, don't lose the dream. Maybe it's just not time."
yes.
So I said, "Okay." And so fast forward a couple of years, 2020 and the end of 2020, and I was doing a podcast with a pastor, and he stops in the middle of the podcast and he says, I want to tell you that you are going to have stratospheric being known stratospherically. He said, you're going to sell out the stadiums, these things. He said, but don't, God wants me to tell you that to remind you that you are not a motivational speaker. You did not get here on
Mm,
your own, that God did this for you. And
mm.
so, and I'm like, I went
Okay.
podcast a couple of months ago. I'm like, he really did say that. And so afterwards, he said, you need to write a book. And I said, Pastor, I've tried. And
Mhm.
he said, "No, you're gonna meet my book agent today." And I was like, "Are you
Like,
kidding?"
what?
Yes. And so he set up the meeting. Within a couple of weeks, I had a book agent. And then in the book, the part where, and you'll see this when you read it, when I went to live in my best friend's basement,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
I thought I was crushed and done. I was really being buried.
Yeah,
God gave me 3 months to be in that basement, really not come out other than to eat.
right.
I healed and I wrote a book proposal in that basement for Relentless Joy. At first, it was called Chasing Joy.
Mhm,
Um, and then that spring, late spring, summer, I got the book deal, and it has been amazing. And I got to tell you
mhm,
one little other short story about this.
mhm, for sure.
I worked with, and it's again, everything that I do is I'm inviting people to see yourself in my story,
Mhm,
because I'm not going to show you. It's like my social media, Sandy. I am determined to show people the good, the bad, the happy, the sad. I show up
mhm,
without makeup. I I just I'm like I'm myself, and because I have a lot of young women that follow me, older women. I just want to encourage them
you
outside
wanna
of the
be
makeup.
real.
Be real. Be real.
Mhm,
Today, happy day where I wear it, but sometimes I don't. So fast forward, the book comes out. I've worked with a book coach who helps you become a bestseller. So Sandy, I am super focused at this time. Last
mhm,
June, I'm super focused at this time on the book numbers. I'm making a bestseller, and so I'm on a book tour. About 2 weeks in, and I checked the numbers, and they are not. This is a very vulnerable story. They're not where I wanted them to be. Now they were great, but they were not where I wanted them to be. And
mhm,
so I pitched a royal hissy fit. I was at home. I was in my childhood bedroom, and I'm ashamed to say this, but I'm also vulnerable enough to say this so that I can help other people.
mhm.
I shook my fist at God, and I said, "What are you doing, God?
Yeah.
You told me to do this. I've worked so hard. I've made it my
Mhm,
full-time job launching this book. What are you doing to me? And then this, and I didn't get the numbers to make the New York Times bestseller, the USA and USA Today." And so I packed all my stuff up in this hissy fit like a toddler because, again, mask off, and I'm just being real.
mhm. It's
And
good, it's good.
my dad had taken my stepdad had taken 2 days off to be with me. I get all my stuff, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I just need to go home." And, left him, he has
Mhm,
these days off, and I'm driving home, and I'm bawling, and I'm
mhm,
crying, and God, like you calm a child after they've had the hissy fit, after they're done screaming and crying, and he said, "Rachel, why did I ask you to write this book?" I said, first of all, I apologize for shaking my fist at him. And I said, and I'm driving, so I probably look like a crazy person, Sandy. Whoever's
it's okay.
around me,
I've been there, trust me.
this whole conversation is going on, in the car. And I said, "God, you told me to write it for one person." And he said, "Rachel, has one person been affected by this book?" And I said, "Yes, yes, God. Yes, God."
Mhm,
And he said, "Then you've done what I've asked you to do." And
right.
so from that moment forward, early
Mhm,
July to mid-August, I just said, "You know what? I'm going to work on promoting this book, but I'm going to take my eyes off the worldly numbers, and
right.
I'm just going to refocus on God."
Yeah,
No, nothing wrong with having goals and business and those things,
yeah.
but I had become a little bit of a slave to it,
Mhm,
and so I took my eyes off of it, and I refocused on God. And in mid-August, I opened an email. I had my camera up for some other reason. I was recording some content, and I opened an email, and it was from my publisher, and they said, Congratulations, you made a Christian bestseller list."
that's amazing. Talk about a moment of joy, a moment of joy for you to celebrate, right?
Yeah, but I had to go through, but
Yeah,
that's the thing, Sandy. So many people just show you their wins. They
yeah,
just show you their good stuff.
yep.
And I had to go through this reckoning for God
Mhm,
popping my hand, for
mhm,
apologizing to God, for acting out, to all the things that I did to not being focused on the right
mhm,
things, to, and I had to go through that whole journey to get to this place of, success. And I want to share with people that are listening, or the more vulnerable you can be about your journey, about your
mhm.
path, about your life, there's somebody that's attached to your purpose.
Yeah,
Meaning, if you'll get bitter, or excuse me, if you'll get better, not bitter,
yeah,
and you will share your story and what you've been through, I
yeah.
guarantee you there's somebody in your future that is attached to you that needs to
Mm,
hear what was meant to kill you,
yeah.
but did.
Yes, absolutely. You're speaking so much truth right now, not only to my soul, but probably to so many people that are listening, whether they're authors or whatever journey they're on, to try to find that purpose and that whatever that success may be. And so many people I know right now are say students that are graduating. I went to university, I've got this degree, but I can't find a job. Why did you send me here? There's so many why questions. And I think that when we do pull back and we put our focus on him, which is I need to do that more than ever right now. Instead of looking at the world and what the world is saying, affirmation or whatever it is, it's all about what he's calling us to do and pointing back to him. And that's a
Yes.
daily dying to ourselves. And if we don't do that every day, we do become dependent on the world and what other people are saying. It can happen overnight. It can happen in a second when we take our eyes off of him. So, and you know what? You started the I'm changing the narrative. And I would love for you to share before we do finish up today a little bit about this beautiful gift that you created from the ground up that God called you to do when you're thinking, what are you calling me to do? I don't know what this is all about. And then it went into the Joystarter, into the podcast. And I mean, there's so much more we could talk about. We'll probably have to do a part two. But let's talk about the I'm changing the narrative and the Joystarter. Love
Yeah,
to share that.
absolutely. Yeah, so I'm changing the narrative again. If you will really get real with yourself and look in the mirror, and that's the
Mm,
hardest thing to do is do this. God wants to do a work in you, but it requires work from you too. It requires surrender,
absolutely.
it requires truth, it requires oftentimes therapy, it requires things of you. And so I had gone through domestic violence many years ago, and there was a case that was in the news about 8 years ago that really I thought that I had, really moved past that. I thought that I was no longer affected by it, that I dealt with it, that I processed it. And there was a case in the news 8 years ago that really brought it back like a searing hot poker. And so I
Mhm.
wrote I wrote an article at the time. I was a writer and a radio host and a sideline reporter, so I was really busy,
Just a little
and,
bitty.
a little bit. And so I wrote this article called "College Football is Breaking My Heart," and it went
Mhm.
viral. And from that, I heard God saying to me, "I created you to be a do something girl. You are audacious." So I created this curriculum, and I giggle now when I say curriculum, Sandy, because it was a 2-page Google Doc. Like there was no
It's
curriculum
the
about it.
beginning, but it's the beginning, right? You have to start with something. You have to start with that blank screen, right?
Yes, and the enemy will keep us bound, and he'll say,
Yes.
"You're not educated enough, you're not smart enough, you're not thin enough, you're not short enough, you're not tall, you're not whatever enough."
Mhm.
Um, to start. And I am telling people, if I give you anything today for your soul, it's start. Take
Yeah.
the tiniest step. That's still a step. And so
Mm.
I thought I would get into high schools, but a dear friend of mine named Dr. Kevin Elko, who's a sports psychologist to many pro teams and college teams,
Mhm.
successful ones,
Mhm.
many rings. He said, "I'm going to get you into FSU football," and I'm like, and I had
You're
never
like,
put
okay.
two and two together to go into colleges, even though I was a college football reporter. And so that was August 26th, 2016. And in that time, it started as purpose, passion, platform,
Mm.
my own experience with domestic violence and what makes your heart beat faster.
Right.
And Sandy, in the 8 years since, it just chokes me up. In the 8 years since, I've worked with 80 plus colleges, many of them
Mhm.
multiple times. We've expanded out into law enforcement, Customs and Border Patrol, high schools, junior highs, churches, halfway houses, you name it, we'll go. Corporations, I
Mhm.
coach, people, I do talks at corporations, I do trainings. But the craziest place it has taken me, and the most beautiful place, I'm actually going again before Christmas, is I go and work in maximum security prisons.
Incredible. Incredible. Well, you shared an incredible story about the halfway house for women. It's not called the halfway house. What was the name of
Love
that?
lady. The
Yes.
love lady.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that, man, people, you got to go back and listen to that podcast. It's moving and so beautiful. And I think God is calling you to these places. They're desperate. They need love. They need Jesus. They need a light. They need somebody like you to come in and validate and encourage them. And you're doing such an incredible thing. I mean, what was the door that kind of opened up to the maximum security prison for you?
Yeah, so I was contacted by a friend of mine, a client actually. Her name is Belinda, and she had a contact of a woman named Christy Overton Johnson, who has a magazine that is that is in so many prisons, and I think
Mhm.
they do like 15, 20,000 copies, but it goes into
Wow.
prisons and then it gets passed around. And so
Amazing.
they asked me, I know it's crazy, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's called Victorious Living, just to give them a plug.
Wow.
Um, they asked me several years ago if they could put me on the cover. Well, she writes the story, and I remember being so terrified because I
Yeah.
talked about my past with addiction, and I had to clear that with my husband, and I had to get his blessing to begin to talk about it because in the book I talk about, and this is super important, I had somebody who attached shame to my story. It was a former agent of mine, and he said, "Don't you dare talk about your 9 years of cocaine addiction. Don't you dare talk about that to anybody outside of the
Yeah.
halfway house." And
Yeah.
this is before I started I'm changing the narrative. I was just a sportscaster.
Yeah.
And I didn't know at the time, I didn't get that he had attached his shame to my story. So I got my husband's
Oh,
blessing. I talked to my children about it. They were blown away, but they were grateful that I
oh.
shared that with them.
Yeah.
And so, around that time that happened, and God planted a little seed. There was a player, this is also going in the new book, there was a player after I spoke one time, Sandy, that came up to me, waited for everybody else to leave, and he began to weep. And
Mhm.
there's a picture of us where there was people in the room, but they were way far away from us, so it was private. And I
Right.
had my hand on his back, and he's weeping, and I'm weeping over his shoulder. And he gathers himself and he says, "Miss Rachel," he said, "my dad's incarcerated." He said, "He's about to get out and he wants a relationship."
Mhm.
And he said, "I'm
Mhm.
just not sure about that." And his name's Chris. And I said, "Chris," I said, can I tell you what I think?" And he said, "Please." And I said, "I believe your father's probably also incarcerated, not only in metal
Mhm.
and cinder blocks, but he's also probably incarcerated in a prison of his own mind.
Yeah.
He has failed as a father. He's failed as a citizen. He's failed as a husband. You
Mhm.
know, and I said, I'm not asking you to be his best friend
Right.
tomorrow. All I'm asking you is crack the door
Yeah.
to reconciliation
Right.
with him, being open to that." And I said, "Do you think you can do that?" And he said, "Yes." Well, I got a message from him about 6 months later, Sandy, and, they had gone fishing together.
He did? Wow, he really cracked the door.
Yeah, he cracked the
Wow,
door, and
he
so
did.
and so that I told Chris that recently. I said, "You did not know it. I did not know it, but that's how
Yep.
God works. He's
Yep.
so amazing like that."
Yep.
He was planting the seed, then the magazine
Mhm.
happened, and then all of a sudden one day I woke up and I'm like, "I really feel like I need to go into prisons." And I asked my husband and he said, "You have my blessing."
Wow.
So Victorious Living, they took me into my first prison. That was last year, last fall, and I've now been into 4 prisons 7 times.
Wow. That's incredible. That's so beautiful. It kind of goes with your motto that you talk about where you say you're taking your mess and you're making it into a message. And you also talk about, and I love this what you say, when you get there, don't forget to throw the rope back for someone. And you're living that. You are just living proof of literally throwing that rope for someone else saying, I've been there. And then you are vulnerable and you are opening up your heart. And that allows people to do the same. And in your book, you talk about how you literally are the last person there. You make a choice. I mean, as much as you can. There's obviously times where you might have to quickly go to a flight. But I think because of your choice to do that, people that are sitting there that are stirring, that feeling when you're like, I need to talk to somebody, I need to pray, but I don't want anyone to know. And then there's like two or three people left in you, and then they get up and go. And that's the game changing moment, right? So thank you for doing that. That's a really amazing blessing for people, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you for calling that out because it's so interesting that you picked up on that, Sandy,
Mm,
because I've often spoke about the
mm,
fact that there are people that do what I do and bless them. I'm not at all coming against them. I'm just saying there are different
right.
kinds of people in the world. And
Yeah,
there are people that
absolutely.
do what I do. They pick up a check, they leave, they speak,
Mm,
they're done. They have a set of notes, they've got their PowerPoint, and that's it. This to me is altogether different.
yeah.
This is a calling. It
Mhm,
is my baby. It's in my
mhm,
soul. It is my ministry.
mhm.
I had a dear friend who was a famous football coach, Coach Bobby Bowden said, "Shug," he said, "You preaching the Bible without ever preaching the Bible." And so even in places where I can't say God, I can't say his name, I'm still teaching his principles. And
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
I said many times on stages that if somebody walked up and said, right before I got up, let's just say I just got on stage and somebody said,
Mm,
"Whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm going to give you $1 million check, but all you have to do is walk out of here right now. Don't talk,
Yeah.
don't hug anybody, don't speak. Just walk out and go cash
Mhm.
the check. I can say with all certainty that I would not,
Mhm.
I would take the check.
But that's not who you are. That's not what I've seen and known just from your podcast and your book and even our conversation today, because your heart is there. That's your heart is right there to serve. And it's not for money. It's a part of your job. Obviously, that's the bottom line. It's your job. But at the same time, it's more than that. It is God using you and the gifts that He's given you. And He's bringing people into the ultimate story of God's story, of what He wants to do in their lives and in their hearts, because it's all about eternity. It's all about being with Him. And you are doing that in such a beautiful and profound level. And I'm so grateful for that. So grateful. And, honestly, we could probably talk for a very long time, but I want to be respectful of the fact that you have a lot going on. So maybe we'll look ahead to another conversation. But Rachel, thank you so much for sharing your heart today. Thank you for writing the book, Relentless Joy. And thank you for encouraging people to stir them up to good works, just like I talked about in Hebrews. And you are doing an incredible thing. And I will be praying for you and rooting for you. I can't wait for your second book. This is very exciting.
And I just want to say to you before we hang up, I and in this number one, I believe there will be many.
Mm,
Um, but this first visit, thank you, Sandy, for you have God has given you, and I sense this just an awakening. Your
mm,
spirit is open. You have that garment of openness. You
mm,
are discerning things. You're discerning situations. You're
mm,
discerning for people. And so I sense that about you, and that when one alive soul with another alive soul, like recognizes like, right? And so I just want to give you that
mm,
compliment that God is proud of you,
mm,
for just how alive and awake you are to the needs of others, to the
mm,
needs of the world, how perceptive you are. There's many of us just because of circumstances or
mm.
busyness or any of the things that we're just, we're going about our day with our blinders on.
Right.
And I've been there before, and I just refuse to yield any more days to the enemy, and I refuse to live any more days with my blinders on to
Love that.
and also to wish for Fridays and dread Mondays. I will not live that life. I
Yeah.
will not. And I will
Yeah.
teach as many people as I can
Yeah.
until I arrive at my maker, dusty and beat up, all used up. I will teach people until I leave this planet, to be
Mm.
awake and alive like you are.
Love it. Thank you. That's a huge encouragement. I really appreciate you saying that. Thanks, Rachel. You've tasted and seen that the Lord is good. And now you're just out there to tell everybody, just you wait and see what God's got in store for you. And that's exciting. And it brings joy to my heart and to the listeners today. I really hope you've been encouraged. And I can't wait to have you back. So thank you again for joining us, Rachel. And have a wonderful Christmas and New Year's with your family. And hopefully we'll be in touch in the new year.
Thank you so much.